Welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever stared at a Salesforce screen and just wondered how all the pieces fit together? Well, if so, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to break down the core building blocks of Salesforce, starting from the tiniest piece of data and building all the way up to the powerful rules that make the whole system work. So, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to tackle 5 key areas, kicking things off with the very DNA of your data, your custom fields, and then building up layer by layer until we get to the rules that automate and protect your entire business. Let's dive right in.
All right, first up, we have to talk about the absolute foundation of any Salesforce org, custom fields. Just think of these as the Lego bricks. They're the custom-built containers that are going to hold every single unique piece of information your business needs to track. Now, creating a new field is a really straightforward 4-step process. First, you got to decide what kind of data it's going to hold. Is it text, a number, a date? Simple. Next, you give it a name. Then comes the really crucial part, security. Who gets to see this field? Who's allowed to edit it? And finally, you have to actually place it on the page so your users can see and use it. Easy as that. And here's a little pro tip for you, formula fields. These things are awesome. They basically do the math for you. You could, say, create a formula to automatically figure out the commission on a sale. The one key thing you have to remember, though, is that they are always read-only. That value is calculated by the system, so users can't just jump in and change it manually. Okay, so we've built our custom fields. Now what? How do we control who sees what? Well, that brings us to tailoring the user experience. And this is so important for making sure your teams are efficient and not getting bogged down with information that has nothing to do with their job. The magic that makes this happen is something called a record type. Think of it like a special lens. Depending on who's looking at a record, let's say it's a sales rep versus a support agent, the record type can show them a completely different page layout and a different set of options, all perfectly tailored for their specific role. And this right here is what makes the record type so incredibly powerful. It's the master controller for 3 huge things. It defines the business process, it decides which options show up in your drop-down menus, and it controls the entire page layout. All 3 of those are bundled into one record type. And this is a perfect example of why that matters so much. Let's say your sales team needs to see all the financial data on an account, but your support team just needs to see the case history. Well, you can't just hide a couple of fields. To create those truly separate, distinct views, you absolutely need a unique record type and a unique page layout for each team. Now, you're going to want to lean in for this one because this is a classic trip-up. You absolutely can show different drop-down options for different record types. That's a fantastic feature. But what you can't do is use a user's profile to hide one specific option within that list. The control is at the record type level, not the individual user profile. Remember that. Okay, so we figured out how to tailor what our users see. Now let's talk about how we guide their actions. This is all about defining a really clear path to success, especially for something like a sales cycle. And we do this with what's called a sales process. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It's a predefined path of stages for an opportunity. This makes sure every single sales rep is following the same playbook, moving deals from one stage to the next in a consistent, predictable way. And here is where things get really efficient. You can design one single perfect business process, and then, as you can see here, you can apply it to multiple different record types. So you could have record types for new business and renewals, and have both of them follow the exact same core sales process. But, and this is a big but, there's a key limitation you have to know about. You can create these processes for a lot of the big objects, leads, opportunities, cases. But there is one major exception. You cannot create a business process for the campaign object. Just doesn't work. All right, so we've got our fields, our layouts, and our processes, but right now they're just kind of floating around. The true magic of Salesforce comes from building relationships between all your data. So let's see how that works. So for the absolute tightest link you can make between 2 objects, what's called a master detail relationship, there's a very strict rule. I want you to burn this number into your brain. 2. An object can only have 2 masters. That's it. It's a hard limit. But don't panic. That limit of 2 isn't as restrictive as it sounds. You can still create all sorts of complex, many-to-many relationships. You just do it using a special object that sits in the middle. It's called a junction object, and it acts like a bridge, letting you make countless connections. And finally, let's talk about being the gatekeeper. How do we protect our data? How do we make sure the information going into Salesforce is actually accurate and complete? We need business rules that enforce our company's logic. So here's the big question. How do you stop bad data before it ever gets into the system? For example, how do you force a sales rep to enter a reason every single time they mark an opportunity as closed lost? How do you enforce that? The answer is a validation rule. And it's a beautifully simple, powerful tool. You just write a formula that checks the data. If that formula finds a problem, if it returns true, bam, it blocks the save and pops up an error message, forcing the user to fix their mistake before they can move on. And when you're writing these rules, oh man, understanding this distinction is everything. Ice changed is simple. It just asks, hey, did this field's value change at all? But prior value is way more specific. It asks, what was the value before this change happened? This lets you build incredibly powerful rules, like if the prior value of the stage was negotiation and now it's closed lost, then this other field can't be blank. It's a subtle difference, but it's a total game changer. So there you have it, the fundamental building blocks of Salesforce. We've gone all the way from a single custom field to tailored page layouts to guided sales processes, and finally to the validation rules that protect the integrity of it all. You now have the toolkit. The only question left is, what are you going to build?